I'm glad to be able to do this live stream again tonight. I'm happy to see you here. Thanks for showing up and thanks for hitting the like button already. I see I already got one. Fantastic. And so today I wanted to talk about several different things that have to do with culture right now, and specifically American culture. For one, it is Women's History Month right now. And so I've learned a couple things over the course of Women's History Month that I thought were interesting enough to share. But speaking of women, happy birthday, Mom. It is my mother's birthday today, so I know, Mom, you never like making a big deal about it, but I can't help myself but say happy birthday. So there you go. Happy birthday, Mom. And so, in addition to talking a little about Women's History Month and a couple women's rights issues related to that, I also wanted to get to talking about languages spoken in the US, like how many of them are spoken, how many Americans speak a language other than English, and what languages are they, and all that. And I want to get into New York City and the linguistic diversity in New York City as well. So that's after discussing a couple of things about Women's History Month. And then on top of that, I wanted to talk about the passing. 7 days ago, Nicholas Brendon died. And the day before that, Chuck Norris died. So I wanted to mention both of them a little bit. And I also wanted to talk about how there's going to be another No Kings protest tomorrow. Rallies all around the country again. So this is now the third one. And oh, hi, Sunshine. It's, well, no, you found me. Here I am. And, and yes, it's Steve's baby too. Okay, understood. But anyway, so in addition to talking about the other stuff I mentioned, I also wanted to talk about No Kings 3, which is the next No Kings protest coming up tomorrow. And we are having a couple events in Albany for it. So I'm, wondering if I should go there and maybe even do a little live stream from there. It sounds like maybe it can be fun if I can get my butt out of bed soon enough to get down there. There's that. And then near the end of this live stream, I want to talk about how surprisingly, the number of abortions done each year in the US is holding very strong. It's keeping steady, even though there's so many states with restrictions and bans on abortions ever since they overturned Roe versus Wade. But I'm leaving that one to the very end of this live stream because I know that's a very sensitive topic for a lot of people, and I didn't want to chase people away at the very beginning. And I will give you a trigger warning in a while when I get around to that, when I'm about to talk about the abortions, the A word. And so I'll save that to the very end. So getting back to what I first mentioned, which is that it's Women's History Month right now. And so I had to look it up to see a few things about it, but one thing I learned over the course of Women's History Month is that, women were not guaranteed the right to vote until 1920, which of course was through the 19th Amendment. So in 1920, and so women had been able to vote for 106 years now, and that's so sad since men were allowed to vote for so much longer than that. And surprisingly, in New York State history, actually black men got to the right to vote in the 1880s. So that means women were actually put off till even longer than that. But that's not the main point I want to talk about. The other thing I learned was more surprising to me. Did you know that before 1974, it wasn't legally guaranteed for women to be able to open bank accounts in their own names, or even get credit cards or secure loans or anything in their own names, because it wasn't until 1974 that this became um, federally a rule where people cannot discriminate against women or against people based on their marital status, so especially against non-married women. And that was surprising to me because that seems really, really recently. That was only 52 years ago. And, but that's when it was federal across the US that women gained this right. Um, Whereas before that, there were a couple of states who had arranged similar legislation statewide only before that, like in California. It was in 1862 that they passed legislation allowing women to open bank accounts in their own names. Um, so that was way back in 1862, but it wasn't until 1974 that these kinds of rights were guaranteed across all of the US. And so what happened in 1974? It was a piece of legislation federally that's called the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974. So that was, yeah, that wasn't until then. And so that's when women first would automatically federally have a right to open bank accounts and apply for credit cards and even secure loans without a cosigner and all that. And that to me was really surprising that it was that recent. And because it wasn't until, therefore, the 1970s that it was made illegal for banks and other financial institutions to discriminate based on sex or marital status. And what's interesting to me is that before 1974, banks could legally deny women credit cards or checking accounts, or even discount their income by up to 50% while calculating their credit worthiness. So what it sounds like in a lot of places, women were getting really discriminated against in the banking sector. And what's interesting to me about that is that it wasn't until pretty much well, all the baby boomers had reached adulthood and everything like that, and well, most of them anyway. And yeah, to me, that's very much more recent than I would have thought. And it was funny to me that I was completely unaware of this. I mean, I guess it's true that I wasn't even alive yet in 1974, but you would have thought I would have learned this somewhere around. But I'm glad. Well, that's why I'm glad I'm paying a little attention when hearing all these reportings about women's history lately. So that's good to know anyway. And so now after, oh, hi, Henry. um, and oh, yeah, and happy birthday, Steve. Uh, I should have mentioned that earlier. When you brought that up, sunshine. Anyway, and so another thing I wanted to talk about would be, I guess, the linguistic stuff, the language stuff. And so, what languages are spoken in the US and by how many people and all that. I find this stuff pretty fascinating as a linguist, of course. And so, for one thing, I find the US especially monolingual a lot of times because, did you know, it's between 77 and 78% of Americans, more than three quarters, speak only English at home. And so this is according to the census data for reporting what languages are spoken at home by people ages 5 and older. And so more than three quarters of us Americans speak only English at home. And And I guess that one thing that would not surprise you at all is that the second most widely spoken language after English is Spanish, of course. And Spanish is spoken by about 13.9% of Americans at home. This is just the number of Americans reporting that they speak Spanish at home, which is about 42 million or so. And I think that's interesting that that number is only reported at 42 million because I know that we have more than 57 million Spanish speakers altogether. So I wonder if many of them are using it in context other than at home, right? Like, and not reporting use at home because they only speak it at work or at church or out socializing with other people. It's always possible. And the fact that the US has over 57 million Spanish speakers, did you know? Well, here's a fun fact. Did you know that the country in the world with the second most Spanish speakers of all is the United States of America? Yeah, and we're second only to Mexico. Mexico has more Spanish speakers than we do, and again, in the U.S., it's over 57 million Spanish speakers, and so that's to me even more interesting that it turns out that there's more Spanish speakers in the U.S. than there are in Spain. To me, that's that's interesting. So, of course, English is the most widely spoken language in the US, and it's sort of an official language here, but not fully yet because it hasn't been made law, but it has been pronounced by executive order that all the federal agencies will use English, will consider English as the first language. So Spanish is a pretty strong second at nearly 14% of Americans speaking that at home, and an even larger percentage speaking it um, if you include all the contexts where people could speak this. Now, and there's nothing that comes even close to Spanish for the third or fourth or fifth language, right? Spanish um, is about, again, 42 million people report speaking Spanish at home on the census in the US, which is about 13.9%. Now, after that, Chinese. Although to count Chinese, this is only when the census includes together both Mandarin and Cantonese together. We have about 3.5 million Chinese speakers, Chinese home speakers in this country. And to me, that's interesting because, um, well, that's very, very many, and a whole lot more than even the fourth most widely spoken language in the U.S. With it's this kind of did surprise me too. It's Tagalog, including Filipino. It's if you include Filipino as a kind of Tagalog, then it has about 1.7 million speakers. Um, Huh. Somebody did reiterate that sentiment to you within the last year. That's good to know, Sunshine. But yeah, but yeah, to me again, it's surprising that the U.S. has the second highest number of Spanish speakers in the world because our government seems to be fighting so hard against it right now. Anyway, but so again, languages most often spoken in the US, first English, where more than three-quarters of people speak English at home, then Spanish, where 13.9% of people are speaking that at home, then other languages, all the other languages, the other most commonly spoken ones, are somewhere between 8 and 9% altogether between them all. And again, the first one is Chinese, including both Mandarin and Cantonese, at 3.5 million speakers. And um, the next one is Tagalog, including Filipino, at 1.7 million speakers. And then Vietnamese, actually. Vietnamese has about 1.5 million home speakers in the US. which makes it even more people speaking Vietnamese than speak Arabic or French here. And those are the next two widely spoken languages. Arabic's around 1.3 million speakers, and French is about 1.2 million speakers. But I think that number does not include French Creole. If we add French Creole to that, it would be a higher number, but then again, French Creole is not the same language, right? And so that to me is pretty amazing. And it's sad to me to know that there's only about 1.25 million people reporting use of French at home anymore, because the number, like just a couple of decades ago, the number of people speaking French at home in the Northeast alone was higher than that. And so now, if you include the Northeast, as well as Louisiana and places west of there, like Missouri and Texas, all of it together is only about 1.2 million or so, maybe 1.25 million, not including French Creole. And it's unsurprising that in a country where so many people are speaking English at home, that most Americans, more than 90%, more than 91% of Americans speak English with at least, speak English at least very well, if not excellently, fluently, and whatnot. And it's only about 8.4% of all Americans who report that they speak English less than very well. Um, and and one other thing that surprised me is that we have, I guess, discrepancies in data here, discrepancies in facts when it comes to people reporting how many people speak, how many languages are spoken in the U.S. A widely quoted statistic is 350 languages spoken in the US, which is a lot more than a lot of people would guess, right? But to me, I don't think that's necessarily all of them. I don't think that number could be completely true unless you totally ignore the linguistic diversity of New York City. Because I don't know if, well, many people know a lot of the nicknames that New York City goes by, like the city that doesn't sleep and the Big Apple and Gotham, lots of nicknames. One of said nicknames is the city of 800 languages. And that's because there are at least 700, sometimes people estimate it to be up to over 800 languages spoken throughout the five boroughs altogether. I'm not just talking Manhattan, I'm talking all five boroughs altogether. About 800 languages spoken. So to me, that doesn't really compute. How are we saying that there's 800 languages spoken in New York City, but only 350 in the US? Because, right, New York City is totally part of the United States. It's part of it. So, by my calculations, there's at least 800 languages spoken in the United States if we're including the linguistic diversity of New York City. And um, and speaking of linguistic diversity, nearly 50% of New York City residents speak a language other than English at home. That's nearly half, right? So that is so many millions of people. And hold on. Oh, and so they have so many people speaking languages other than English at home that in New York City public schools alone, there are about 176, well, among students at New York City public schools, there's at least 176 different languages spoken. So I'm really hoping uh, that they're getting a little help understanding the English, and I'm hoping people are, yeah, not falling behind in school because their English isn't strong enough. But anyway, there's that. And speaking of linguistic diversity, did you know that of all the five boroughs, Queens is known as the most linguistically diverse? Let me see if I got any specifically numbers on there. Um, And yeah, Queens has the highest concentration of on language diversity of any of the boroughs. So that's Queens is the most diverse. And by the way, what are the most common languages in New York City? On top of English, of course, which is still spoken at home by more than 50% of people. Then you have Chinese, and again, we're lumping Mandarin and Cantonese together, even though I don't think they're technically same language. But we do. The census sort of lumps that together when doing the data. So common languages: Chinese, then Russian, and then French Creole is a pretty popular language, as well as Bengali, and of course, Yiddish. Remember, this is New York City we're talking about, so Yiddish is commonly spoken at home. And Korean is also widely spoken at home, as well as Italian Americans will probably not be too surprised to know that Italian is a pretty widely spoken language at home in New York City as well. And since about 2.5 million New York City residents have limited English proficiency, that makes translation services pretty much essential if you want to access public services and you don't speak English so well. Translation services will come in really handy for you there. And I'm glad that at least in some cases those are available to people. I always get disappointed about how we're not so uh, helpful towards linguistic minorities in the U.S. Because there's so much of a push to just speak English, and by that we mean American English specifically. But yeah, so that's a bunch of language facts about languages in the U.S. as well as the unique diversity of New York City as far as how linguistically diverse they are in this country, anyway. And yeah, so that's the first couple of things I wanted to talk about. And now let's get to the sad passing of two celebrities. And so again, first I want to talk about Nicholas Brendon, who he passed away. I know on YouTube you have to be very careful about what words you use describing someone who is uh, well, unalive. That's one word we're allowed to use. But sadly, um, oh, sorry, I'm starting to read the chats a little bit. Um, oh, Steve was surprised here. You already had a smattering of Yiddish when you met. Well, that's understandable that he might be surprised by that because it's not like you grew up Jewish or anything. And anyway, and so again, Nicholas Brendon, he died exactly 1 week ago today, so March 20th, and uh, he was pretty widely known as a TV star, especially for two shows. Number one, he played Xander Harris, aka Alexander Harris, in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show that unfortunately Hulu just turned down the idea for a reboot on. But anyway, and so that's where I knew him from, and a lot of people knew him from. He was on that TV show Criminal Minds. He was, I think his character's name was Kevin Lynch on Criminal Minds, and a lot of people know him from there. And we don't have really a lot on his actual cause of death. We know they're reporting that he passed away of natural causes. He passed away while asleep. So, but we can only really assume that because a friend who was taking care of him found him slightly after he died and said that he was positioned as though he were asleep. So it's sort of an assumption that he passed in his sleep. And I know that, yeah, he had some serious health issues going on, like a congenital heart defect, which is pretty scary. That can kill you at whatever age. Oh, I shouldn't have used the K word. I got to be careful again on YouTube. And he was 54 when he passed away. So, in my opinion, that's a bit young, of course. But in addition to the congenital heart defect, he had a very rare and probably very painful nerve disorder. And so, yeah, I didn't like learning about, well, hearing about how he was probably suffering for a lot of the last years of his life. So that's kind of sad. And by the way, he did pass away at home in Indiana, where he was born in LA, but he moved to Indiana years back, and he's been living there for a few years now. And so that's where he passed away. So I guess, you know, um, passing in your sleep of natural causes. I, if that is how he went, I find that well, a good way to go. I don't know if I would want to go any other way than in my sleep. Just a thought. Anyway, and who I'm feeling really bad for right now, because you might not have known that Nicholas Brendon was an identical twin, and his identical twin's brother's name is Kelly Donovan. And why is it that two twins don't have the same last name? I think it's because when they both joined the Screen Actors Guild, um, they cut off their last names and they went by just their first and middle names. So um, you had Nicholas Brendon. Brendon was actually his middle name originally, not his last name, but for showbiz reasons, they sort of cut off the last name, and that's how his twin brother's name is Kelly Donovan. And the two are certainly identical twins, as far as I can tell. And you can tell this especially. There's one episode in Buffy the Vampire Slayer again, which I'm watching again. I started watching that again right after he passed. Because I was like, well, I thought of Xander and all that. And so, um, oh yeah. Oh, you just watched the Buffy episode about the hyenas? Yeah, that was a pretty gross one. The pack, I hated how Xander kind of got drawn into them, but I did kind of like how Xander wasn't really part of the pack. The pack, he didn't do anything um, so terrible, except, well, anyway. But I did like it that he was not the bad guy in that one, even though he was infected by a hyena possession. But going back to where I was going with this is, you can tell that he has an identical twin brother in a season 5 episode. Oh, if you just watch the pack, you must still be in season 1, right? Anyway, oh yeah, because still Principal Flutie existed until that episode. Anyway, but season 5 episode 3, I think it's called, The Replacement. There's this demon named Toss who ends up hitting Xander with this beam out of this magic rod thing he has, that splits him into two halves. Into one would be his stronger, better qualities, and the other one would be his weaker qualities. And the idea was this demon was hoping to split the Slayer, Buffy, into half to be able to, because if you unalive one half, the other goes with it, right? So that was a good idea, making a really weaker Slayer that he could take out as a demon, but it didn't work out for him. Accidentally, Xander got hit with it, and they didn't do this through Nicholas Brendon playing both parts, but just by digitally putting two of him on the screen at the same time. They actually, his brother Kelly Donovan, who often worked as a stunt person, as a stunt man for Buffy, which I'm sure when Xander's character has stunts coming up, it's easy to switch to his twin brother to do the stunts, right? But in that episode, The Replacement, um, Kelly Donovan actually played Xander, aka Nicholas Brendon's double. He played Xander's double. And what makes me annoyed as a twin watching this episode, I can't tell which one is which. And that bugs me because I hate it when people get me and my twin Joe mixed up with each other. I hate that. Um, but then again, you can't tell which one is the regular Xander because again, his character was split into two, and so neither one is playing the exact original Xander. I would say they actually make two doubles, and one is played by Nicholas Brendon, the other played by Kelly Donovan. So again, if you wanna, yeah, see some proof that Nicholas Brendon has a twin brother, that episode again, season 5, episode 3, The Replacement. I recommend you check that one out. And for a lot of people, Xander was not their favorite character exactly on Buffy. And I sort of get that because Joss Whedon, who by all accounts is a total creep, and well, anyway, in a lot of ways, including being a womanizer and anyway, lots of other things and being a total jerk. But he sort of wrote Xander in there to be sort of this was himself. Joss Whedon created this character to put himself a little bit of the so-called everyman in there. And I think that might have a lot to do with why, on so many counts, Xander ends up seeming like such a disappointment. Not that I didn't appreciate that character and everything, but it's true that, especially with Hell's Bells, the episode where Xander leaves Anya at the altar, I was most disappointed at him for that one. Anyway, it's funny I'm mentioning the episode, but I haven't even gotten to that one yet. In as I'm rewatching Buffy, but I do remember it anyway. So that's sad, and I can't imagine what Nicholas Brendon's twin brother Kelly Donovan is going through right now because if my twin brother were to pass away, I would be absolutely crushed. I don't even want to imagine what that would be like to deal with, pretty much. So that's my thoughts on that. Now, the other super famous person, and this guy would be even more famous, who passed away the day before Nicholas Brendon, Chuck Norris, passed away in his home state where he was living, Hawaii. So good for him for being able to afford to live in Hawaii. And he he also, we don't have a lot in the way of his cause of death because what we know is he had some undisclosed medical emergency. And sorry, excuse me. He had an undisclosed medical emergency, so he went to the hospital for that. And his family reported that he was in good spirits when he was at the hospital. And then they reported he had passed away. So we don't get a lot of details on exactly what it was. But again, so after some sort of medical emergency, he passed away in the hospital in Kauai, Hawaii. And yeah, and again, yeah, I would hope he would have passed in his sleep again, like we hope for Nicholas Brendon. But um, Chuck Norris to me is kind of funny. Well, very important in American culture. He was the possibly one of the biggest martial arts icons in American history. Although not the only one, but he was certainly a big part of when karate was really popular, right? He was a big karate guy. And I just heard a bit of an interview on Fresh Air, on NPR on Fresh Air, between Terry Gross and Chuck Norris. Just happened to hear that today, and but that's the usual. If a celebrity died, uh, Terry Gross probably interviewed him at some point, and if so, on the So Fresh Air, they're gonna get the interview out there. But anyway, so that yeah, so we sadly over the last 7 8 days had those couple celebrities pass away, although they're not the only ones. But I wanted to make sure I didn't go without mentioning. And just a reminder, please do hit the like button on your way in. That helps YouTube decide to let other people know that this live is happening. It really does help. So please be so kind. And so I guess, yeah, that's a lot of what I wanted to talk about tonight. I have two other things, and they're both a bit political, which is why I wanted to save them for the end. So I'm saving the A word for the very last part. But before that, just a reminder, the No Kings protest is coming back. No Kings rallies will be held all over the country again tomorrow. So Saturday, March 28th, 2026, we'll have even more No Kings protests. And I'm wondering if it's going to gather even more people than it did the last couple of times, because the first No Kings protest was on June 14th, which is ironically, I think that's Donald Trump's birthday. And I don't know if you remember, but at the time there was the big military parade going on in Washington, D.C., that not that many people actually attended. Um, and but at the No Kings protest, even little old Albany, we got more people attending the No Kings protest on June 14th, 2025, with um, about about 5,000 people showing up. An estimated number of 5,000 people showed up to Wolf Road, where the protest was, and all that, which that turns out to be a higher number than is estimated to have attended the military parade in Washington, D.C. So to me, I thought that was kind of funny for just little old Albany, little small Albany, to be able to get those kind of numbers. It's pretty cool. Um, yeah, thank you, Henry. I know you're very clear on which one's which between me and Joe, and I appreciate you for that very much. Anyway, and I know I'm always a little behind in reading in the chat. I'm aware of that. Trying to improve it, but still got a lot of improvement to go, I guess. And so again, the first No Kings protest was June 14th. And in Albany, we had about 5,000 people show up for it. But nationwide, and more than 2,000 rallies being held nationwide, there were an estimated 5 million participants for that. And that was the one way back June 14th of last year, which was 2025. The second one was October 18th of 2025. And that one actually nationwide had even more rallies. So between 2,500 and 2,700 rallies, depending on whose counting you're looking at, across all 50 states. So a lot more rallies happened. And as opposed to the 5 million people who showed up the first time, 7 million people participated in the second time. Because I guess well, no, people were not getting any happier with Donald Trump. But sadly for us in Albany, I was surprised that not more people showed up because, like I said, the first No Kings in Albany was 5,000 people. The second one was only about 2,000 people. And I was annoyed by that because the second one was on Western Avenue, around mostly residential areas. I thought that because these are neighborhoods people live in, maybe more people would show up, and I was mostly disappointed in that there was very little local news coverage about it at all. And I think that maybe the reason why only 2,000 showed up for the second time in Albany is because the No Kings 2 on October 14th, we had a lot more rallies going on in other places in the Capital District of New York, where there was well over 10,000 people participated altogether. And so maybe that explains why less people congregated in Albany if they had other places to go protest. And so that's a little local history for that. And so why and so I'm expecting that maybe even more people, more than the 7 million who showed up last time, will show up again. And the reason I'm expecting this, well, I'm suspecting this may be the case, is because I've heard from people among the groups organizing the events that they're getting a much more diverse pool of people who want to come to it. Like they're seeing more and more people who actually did at one point vote for Donald Trump, and a lot more people who do not consider themselves Democrats or even liberal necessarily. And it's because, well, I guess a lot of people who had previously supported or at least not hated Trump might be upset about. He made a lot of promises on the campaign trail, and a lot of that stuff, the opposite is happening now. Like lower gas prices on day one, which, by the way, have you checked out the gas price? Pump prices lately? And that was another thing he promised, no more wars. He said no more forever wars, and now here we are in Iran. Um, and also, he said, oh, grocery prices would come down, all that. So I think maybe that might be why the organizers are expecting an even bigger turnout this time, is because there are people who are getting disillusioned and disenfranchised with him. And it's certainly true that there's been a lot more protesting going into even more deeper red places during Trump's second term than it was during his first term, and I think by pretty far. So I don't know. I'm wanting to check out that event again tomorrow, and so yeah, you guys think I should? Um, yeah, that's funny. Sorry, Henry. I'm reading your comment. Uh, and yeah, both say lots of people say less when we're in fewer fewer. That's just colloquial English anyway. Um, but anyway, let's ignore that. I love it when people come to be speech monitors. But anyway, um, so yeah, so do any of you in the chat right now think I should show up? But anyway, well, I guess I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on from 11 to 1 in the West Capitol Park, which is a lot of the green area near the Capitol building. That's going to be a rally from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So I'm thinking about going there to check that out and maybe doing a little live stream from there. And then from 1 to 3 p.m., there's going to be a street march slash car caravan going on Central Avenue between North Allen Street and Colvin Ave, um, if you know where that is. So I might want to go check out one or both of those events, and if I see anything useful to bring to YouTube, I will probably do a little live stream there. Anyway, um, and yeah, and so yeah, I guess yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about the No Kings rallies, and especially that it's coming back. So now there's going to be a third one, and and the No Kings rally, it's sort of a um, well, it's one manifestation of a certain strategy that's going on with political activists trying to, and the strategy is to show a lot of defiance, a lot of public defiance en masse of the current administration, and and this would include, of course, the actions of ICE that were pushed by this administration, as well as well, the whole Epstein file saga where Trump's name is all over them. A lot of people unhappy about that. And about, well, the downright oligarchs who have their hooks on this country's government right now. But anyway, and especially I think it's more about being anti-authoritarian. Like a lot of people are getting disillusioned with how authoritarian this government is, this administration is getting anyway. And but yeah, so that's enough about the No Kings protests. And so maybe, hey, you might see me go live again tomorrow if I do make it to those things, and I find a way to make a decent live stream out of it. I'm having microphone issues for that, but anyway, we will see. Hopefully I will get on that. And so the last part I wanted to talk about tonight was the A word. It starts with abort, that A word. Anyway, um, and so this is from something that I heard on NPR, although I'm not sure whether this was produced by Albany's local NPR, which is called Northeast Public Radio, WAMC, or whether this was produced by NPR, the more nationwide agency. But that's where I heard it first. And then, so what the headline caught me was the headline is, despite state bans and restrictions, the number of abortions in the US holds steady. And to me, I thought that is interesting, because does that mean that women are traveling very long distances? Like, a lot of women would have to go 3 or 4 states away to be able to get that procedure done. If you go see a medical professional to do this in person and all that. And it turns out, no, that not so much. There's not that much more travel happening, because it's well, around the pandemic and after that, a lot of us got used to telemedicine. So that's a big part of why there's so many of these procedures still going on, even when people are living in states where the thing is banned, right? And sorry. And so NPR ran the story because a new report was published on Tuesday. And that report was by the Guttmacher Institute. I think Guttmacher, Guttmacher. I'll call it Guttmacher or Gottmacher, either way. Their institute, which is a research institute, a nonprofit research institute that just happens to support abortion access. So that's where the data is. That's who gathered and analyzed the data, were people who are actually supportive of abortion access. So I guess you may want to take this with a grain of salt. Well, a normal amount of skepticism anyway. But the point was, why was this report so poignant, is that it's kind of showing that the rate of abortions annually is not going down, not a bit. Which, to me, that's why that headline drew my attention, because I was thinking, wow, are people having to travel so far for this? Like, and so did those abortion bans and restrictions actually do any good from anybody's point of view? It's hard for me to say. But again, according to this group, again, the nonprofit research group that I mentioned, the Guttmacher Institute, there were an estimated 1,126,000 abortions provided by clinicians in the US in 2025. And that's pretty much unchanged from 2024. And you would think the number would be going down, because after all, Roe versus Wade was overturned, was reversed in 2022. And since then, anti-abortion rights activists have continuously, they pursued laws and court cases and stuff to make access to abortion more and more difficult to find. And And so, despite these state restrictions and bans, which are in, I think, 23 states altogether, uh, which makes for a lot of the US, right? And despite all these going into place, the numbers of abortions per year are not going down. And again, I think a huge part of this is that often these prescriptions for abortions are being acquired through telemedicine. Because in 2023, a couple of years ago, under President Biden, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, allowed mifepristone, one of the medications used in these uh, abortions. They allowed this to be prescribed without an in-person appointment. So all of a sudden, telemedicine will do the trick if you want to get this prescribed. And about the same time as you had lots of states banning and severely restricting abortions, making it criminal, uh, a lot of states like New York and Massachusetts that support abortion access have passed sealed laws which protect the healthcare workers, healthcare providers from legal risks when they prescribe abortions to patients in states with bans on it. So we have all these states banning these and making this criminal and whatnot. But then you have other states saying, oh no, you can't harm our doctors for prescribing this stuff. And then you have telemedicine in the mix. And so when you have telemedicine going in the mix and everything too, um, uh, then it seems yeah, it seems like efforts to restrict abortions in one state might turn out to be a little futile when there are doctors in other states who are willing to prescribe mifepristone and misoprostol, um, which would be the two medications really needed to do this. And I know that they've tried to have the mailing of mifepristone banned and the prescription of that band, but it's hard to get rid of misoprostol because that one is a much older medication and it's used as well for other things like preventing ulcers and whatnot. So all the court cases have been about mifepristone and whatnot. And so, yeah, so with the telemedicine and with the state sealed acts to protecting healthcare supply healthcare providers in states where which support a lot of abortion access. That's made it really difficult for states like Georgia and Louisiana to be able to keep any of their residents from having access um, this to this, which I'm sure has been super frustrating for anybody, for the abortion rights opponents, especially in these states where they have put forth bans, and so there are some legal challenges still making their way through the court, like including a recent congressional bill that aims to force the FDA to stop allowing mifepristone to be mailed to patients, right? That would cut off a lot of the influence of telemedicine. And again, misoprostol is an older medication that would be hard to restrict so much because it has other purposes, but they are going after mifepristone. And Louisiana, the last thing I want to mention about this, I guess, is how Louisiana Attorney General Liz Muriel, Liz Muriel, um, um, that she wants the FDA to change their rules. So you do have Louisiana versus the FDA. So they're suing that and which I guess is trying to take back their own power and their own control over their own places. Oh, that's funny. Um, Henry, you just watch one of those American flag thongs like Will Ferrell had on SNL until I find one. Not sure if I'll be at a protest. I want to protest properly. That's a good point. You want to come out with some good No Kings message on you and not just a red, white, and blue thong. I support that anyway. Um, so, anyway, like I said, there is this lawsuit going on, Louisiana versus the FDA. And so, and I can see why Louisiana is really pissed because for them in 2023, there were 2,500 abortions in Louisiana. But then last year in 2025, there were more than 9,000. So the number's not going down there, is it? So I could see that the people who are anti-abortion were, the folks who were anti-choice would be really pissed about that and would really want to regain their power. And but anyway, that's that. So I did save the A word stuff for the last because I didn't want to. Well, I wanted anybody who is not comfortable with this to be just be able to tune out and not be able to and not have to miss all the rest of what I had to say anyway. And so yeah, one last um, yeah, one last again. If my mom is still watching, which I know if you watched a little, you might have tuned out already because I know this is a super uncomfortable topic for you. But again, happy birthday, Mom. And yeah, so there you go. That's everything I had lined up for tonight. And so again, I am kind of surprised that it wasn't until 1974 that it was illegal for financial institutions to discriminate against women and especially against single women. Because did you know that for last year, 2025, you know that a lot more single women were homeowners than single men? So things have changed a lot in the terms of mortgages and loans, haven't they? Anyway, that's interesting to me. And yeah, I guess that's mostly what I wanted to say. Does anybody have any questions or comments that I should be aware of? I'm gonna look back through. Mm, let's see. No, I think I read aloud most of the. Um, yeah, I've read already most of the comments that I wanted to read through this. So I guess time for me to say thank you all for being here with me. And if you didn't remember yet, please do hit the like button. Please give this a thumbs up. And for anybody who's not subscribed to the channel yet, just a little message. This is the channel is called Language, Culture, and Dr. Lou, and all we do here is language and culture. And so, if that's of any interest to you, please do consider subscribing. So, thanks again for hanging out, and I will talk to you again very soon, possibly as soon as from the No Kings protest tomorrow. We'll have to see about that, but yeah. So thanks again for hanging out with me. I appreciate that very much. And so yeah, until next time, catch you around later. Bye bye.